I know this isn't a good show so far. Oh, there he is. There.
All right.
Hey, Mark. I was
Apologies.
really technically challenged. I could have
That's
used
okay.
your help because this is Dr. Mark Hyman, everybody, who's the, what are you, the chair of the functional medical? What's your official?
Well, I'm actually the head of, I'm the head of strategy and innovation at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, and written a few
He's
books.
the founder of the Ultra Wellness Center and the author of how many New York Times bestseller?
13.
13.
13.
That would be 14 books altogether, because the one book that he and I wrote together was the only one that didn't make the bestseller list.
That's true.
It was an unpopular subject. It was anti-aerosol.
Yeah.
But I could have used you. Cheryl and I were struggling to try to figure out how to add you. And I remember that you taught me when we were on tour for that book. I forget where we were, but we were in the back
New York City in a cab.
Is that where it was? You taught me how to use, I think it was my first iPhone. It was in 2015.
I tell you, you could dictate instead of trying to text with your thumbs. It was a game changer.
Yeah, that was a game changer for me. Now I know how to type a little bit.
Impressive. I'm following you. I was like, wow, Bobby really knows social media. It's impressive.
So let's let the book that you have out now is the
Food Fix.
Food Fix, and
Yes.
the one that really changed my life was the 10-day sugar detox diet.
Yes.
Because that's when I started actually using your recipes. And
you got off Coca-Cola, which was a big thing.
Yeah, and one of the things that Mark teaches people in that book that was really valuable to me when I gave up sugar, and I have to say, I'm back chipping again. One of the things that was really great that you taught me was that sugar is like crack.
Yeah.
And if you're away from it for a little while, 10 days, you stop having the cravings.
Yeah.
And it takes 10 days of really bad cravings.
Yeah, it's true. And sugar not only is like crack, but it also screws up your immune system. So it makes you more likely to get COVID-19, which people don't realize.
Well, I know that because it causes inflammation.
Yeah, it suppresses your immune system. It causes
let's talk about a little bit about COVID, and specifically about one of the things that we're seeing on our national policy is that a lot of people are worried that Dr. Falchi and Bill Gates, who seem to be calling the shots for one reason or another, have a bias against therapeutics and antivirals and treatments that are not patentable medicine, and specifically vaccines.
Mm.
And I want to talk to you about what some of those alternatives look like.
Yeah.
And, the ones that I think are most interesting to me is because so many really brilliant doctors have told me about this. And also there's a lot of really good, there's a number of studies that have come out of China and other places on IV vitamin C.
Yeah.
And George Brekkie, I think now, I don't know if you know him, but he's a really brilliant doctor from Connecticut who I think he has an FDA approval. But what he's saying is in China, the protocols call for them to use, I think, 12 to 20, even 30 grams of vitamin C. And in this country, the FDA won't let you use, will let you use only 2. They'll give you only approvals for 2. And I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's changed, but why don't you talk about the other?
Yeah.
Let me just say the other ones that I've heard have been very effective in hyperbaric chambers, ozone, and then, the usual vitamin D, vitamin or zinc. Yeah. And then some of the antivirals, which I think the jury is out on those still.
Yeah, I mean, I think medicine in general has a bias against things that are not in the traditional paradigm. And whether it's diet and food as medicine, whether it's nutritional supplements or things like intravenous vitamin C. And yeah, there is no large corporations pushing these therapies because they're not patentable. And so there's no profit motive in driving these, which is a problem because no one has a stake in pushing it. I don't think there's a, sort of a deliberate ignoring of it. I just think it's just not on the radar. And I think it's particularly important with COVID-19 because what we're seeing, Bobby, is that about 94 to 97% of the people who die are suffering from some type of diet-related chronic illness, whether it's obesity. And a friend of mine works in the ICU. She said there isn't a person in there under 250 pounds, or heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. These are all diet-related problems. So it really leads you to be pre-inflamed. It suppresses your immune system. And even, if it turns out by some miracle that a vaccine works, they're less likely to work on people who actually need it the most. Those who have chronic disease, those who have being overweight, actually makes you less likely to mount an immune response to the vaccine. So that's a big issue. And I think for people wanting to protect themselves, it's really important to double down on your diet, not eat comfort foods, not eat all kinds of junk, which people are doing, but to really focus on optimizing your biology and your immune system through food, which is what I've written about for years. And I wrote a blog on my website called drhyman.com/C19 for COVID-19, going through what you can do on a dietary level, on a nutritional supplement level, and other strategies to help strengthen your own immune system. So I think that's one big area. And it's not getting enough attention. And it's really what's driving a lot of the health disparities. We're seeing, in African Americans, death rates that are far exceeding the whites. In fact, in some communities, there's 30% African Americans, and there's 70% of the deaths, like in Chicago and Louisiana, which is just unconscionable. And no one's really talking about why. And then there are a lot of things that are evidence-based nutritional supplements that really do seem to work. And in fact, one of my colleagues from Tufts, the dean of Tufts School of Nutrition Science and Policy, Dariush Mazafarian, who's one of the most published scientists in nutrition ever, told me there's a nutritional immunologist who works at Tufts, and they were discussing all the various things that can maximize immune response, particularly if you want to prevent it or if you have it, to prevent progression to a more serious problem. And those are things like vitamin D, and we need adequate levels of vitamin D, vitamins, oral vitamin C, zinc, like you said, something like vitamin A, quercetin. Quercetin is basically from a plant compound. It's from onions and other products that is very powerful against COVID-19. Green tea extracts, melatonin, things like N-acetylcysteine that boosts glutathione. Glutathione is critically important. I've seen reports of intravenous glutathione helping these patients recover. And of course, there's a bunch of other medicinal mushrooms. So there's a whole series of nutrients, and the Institute for Functional Medicine has put out a whole scientific report on what the evidence is for these things. So these are things that are low cost, that are low risk, and potentially beneficial in terms of either preventing it or in terms of mitigating it if you do get it. So those are sort of just basic foundational things that everybody can do. And then there's these other therapies that have been used. In China, they were using high-dose vitamin C, and I personally have used high-dose vitamin C in my practice for decades. I've used it on myself, and there's actually fairly good data using high-dose vitamin C in ICUs, showing improvements in ICU septic patients when nothing else works. In America, there's studies looking at high-dose vitamin C, like 75 grams in cancer, which is actually very effective in many cancer cases. And the way it works, a lot of these therapies...
You're talking IV because you couldn't eat that much vitamin C, right?
No, you'd be in the bathroom all day. It's pretty bad. They get diarrhea.
So just for our listeners, how much should you be eating, and what kind?
Well, you could probably take, 2,000 to 4,000 a day of vitamin C easily. There's no toxicity to it. You can take as much as you want. If it gives you diarrhea or loose bowels, just back off.
So that's the limiting factor when
stomach
problems is tough.
Yeah, exactly. Or you just reduce the dose.
I've been taking Joe Mercola's liposomal vitamin C, which
those are good. Yeah, liposomal vitamin C, liposomal glutathione. These are all things you can get, and these are not expensive. Vitamin D, vitamin A, zinc, N-acetylcysteine, which is a sort of a simple supplement you can take. These are all really effective. Melatonin seems to have some viral effects. Quercetin. So I think people, should take a basic level of nutritional supplementation during this time. And I think the IV stuff is fascinating because all the IV therapies you mentioned, high-dose vitamin C, ozone, hyperbaric oxygen, these are all what we call oxidative therapies. And the way they work is different than you think. You think vitamin C is an antioxidant. It actually works as an oxidant. In fact, the way your white blood cells kill infections is they make bleach, they make hydrogen peroxide, and they make ozone. That's what your white blood cells do to actually kill infections. So your white blood cells try to do it, but it gets overwhelmed and can't do it. So if you take extra vitamin C intravenously, it creates hydrogen peroxide as part of it, and literally can, through the vitamin C, help bolster your immune system and also create this oxidative effect that kills the viruses. I don't think it'll work on its own, but I think it can really be a great adjunct to treatment. And it's being used in multiple hospitals in New York. It's being used in Europe. It's being used in China, and I think with great effect. So it's one of those very low risk therapies with potential benefit. You see the toxicity of things like, hydroxychloroquine and remdesivir. These are not benign drugs, and they have significant side effects. So I think these are simple things you can do. And the other thing is that hyperbaric oxygen also is effective. And what that does is put you in a tank, like a scuba diving accident tank, where they take you down to a couple of atmospheres under the water, essentially, which would be like 2 atmospheres, which is like 66 feet down under the water for the pressure. They pump 100% oxygen and then oxygenate your tissues. Oxygen is also a great disinfectant and kills things. And it hyperoxygenates your tissues, which is a part of the problem in COVID-19. There's just lacking oxygen. And ozone does the same thing. Now, ozone sounds crazy because ozone layer and don't breathe in ozone, it's going to kill you. And yes, if you breathe in ozone, it will kill you and destroy your lungs, just like water. If you inhale water, it's toxic. You will die. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't be using water, and we do use water intravenously. So I think ozone is fact has a number of different effects that are making it particularly effective for COVID-19. One, it's a direct oxidant. So it creates an oxidative burst and literally kills viruses, germicidal. It's the most powerful disinfectant on the planet. And it doesn't last long, but it creates an initial burst that helps to reduce the infectious burden. The second thing it does, which is pretty interesting, is it creates what we call a hormetic response. And that means it's a stress that then kicks the body into a healing mechanism. So if you lift weights, you're going to tear your muscles, but you're going to end up stronger, right? If you do interval training and run till you're about to throw up, it's a stress on your system, but it makes your cells smarter and stronger. So ozone does the same thing. It actually activates your own healing mechanism. So it turns off the genes that cause inflammation. And that's one of the things we see with COVID-19 is overwhelming inflammation. It turns on the genes that inhibit inflammation. And it actually also turns on the genes and the mechanisms to create antioxidants, your body's own antioxidants, which are more powerful than anything you can take. So it's got multiple mechanisms, and there are more that help the body, one, fight the infection and to actually activate its own healing systems. And the data is pretty striking, Bobby. I've been following this out of Europe. And in Europe, they don't have the same biases here as we do here. But there are right now multiple randomized controlled trials going on in Europe with 800 patients total in 26 hospitals, and showing incredibly amazing results using ozone therapy, which is striking to me because it should be something we would be talking about and investigating here. And I think we're trying everything. It's trying everything like, spaghetti on the wall. This is something that's actually been shown to be effective, and the case reports are staggering. In the United States, and 20% of intubated patients in one report from New York City were surviving. In Europe, in the studies, it was 73% of intubated patients. So 73% versus 20%. 94% of non-intubated patients recovered. So it was almost 100%. If you hadn't been intubated yet, you would recover using ozone therapy. They've seen all the biomarkers get better. So there are levels of inflammation, the blood clotting markers, the liver function, the kidney function test, the oxygenation levels, their white blood cells all improve. And they've documented this on, case reports of over 80 patients now. And I think it's something that should be investigated. And I feel strongly that if there are mechanisms, if there is some evidence and data, if the safety profile is good, then we should look at this stuff. And I talked to one of the researchers who's an MD, PhD intensive care doctor in Rome, who's doing one of these trials. He said, what's striking is that none of these patients have any side effects. There's no downside that they've seen in anybody yet, only upside. So it really breaks my heart that we're not actually able to implement a large trial here in this country yet. I'm still pushing for it, because I do believe that the reason we're in lockdown, the reason the economy is in free fall, the reason there's so much chaos is because there's a fear they were going to overload the healthcare system, overload hospitals, and there'll be so many deaths. But this makes really COVID-19 a treatable condition like a strep throat that you don't have to fear. And, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine, Bobby, who lives in Germany. I said, what's it like over there? He said, well, it's open back up, but nobody's out. Everybody's scared. And I think once the pandemic is over, there's going to be a pandemic of fear that's going to continue to inhibit our social movements, interactions, and the quality of our life that I think could be completely arrested if we tried some of these therapies and actually did the research on it. So if anybody listening who's a doctor or runs a healthcare system is interested in doing a trial, you can easily join the multi-center trial. They're listed on clinicaltrials.gov. I know the researchers, you can talk to them. It's really kind of exciting to see what's happening over there because I think it could be a game changer.
How do you administer ozone? Does it come like in a scuba tank?
Yeah, no. So there's a machine. It was actually invented by Nikola Tesla. He invented the first ozone generator, and essentially it's an oxygen tank hooked up to this ozone generating machine, and it converts the O2 into O3, which is ozone, and then it becomes a gas. Then you can administer it in multiple different ways. It can be done rectally, and people are using it rectally, which is not so much fun, but people do it. And there's also intravenously through different techniques. The main technique essentially is withdrawing about a cup of blood, injecting about, you know, a cup or a 250 cc's of ozone and oxygen gas. So it's mostly oxygen. It's about 97 to 95% oxygen, or 95 to 99% oxygen, and 1 to 5% ozone. And then it's mixed into the blood. You stir it around, and then you hang it back up. So you basically just draw the blood out by putting IV line in, putting the bag on the floor, hanging it up, injecting with ozone and oxygen gas, mixing it up, and letting it drip back into the body. And that's called major autohemotherapy. That's what they're using in Europe. There are other techniques we call 10-pass or hyperbaric ozone, where essentially you use a machine to pull it out rather than gravity, and then to push it back in under pressure. And you can do 10 cycles within an hour instead of 1 cycle. So you can get much more medicine, so to speak. There's also direct IV gas, which sounds crazy, but the gas that's dangerous in the IV would be air with nitrogen. But actually injecting oxygen and ozone is not harmful. And I've done it, I've had it on myself, and I've seen many patients have amazing results, particularly me when I was very sick with mold toxicity. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of different ways of administering it. It's very inexpensive, literally pennies a treatment. And yeah, it's not patentable, which is a problem. So,
you know, I saw a proposal by Dr. Ted Fogarty, who's a big advocate of hyperbaric, to take jets or cargo planes, which are pressurized, and making those into hyperbaric chambers, which he said would be a very easy adjustment where you could treat, you know, hundreds of people at the same time.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, you think about it, those planes are not doing anything, so might as well use them.
And then you know, you've been my friend for I don't know how long, like 20 years or something. We've been all over the world together. We've been whitewater kayaking and
many near-death experiences.
And Chile, and yeah, many of those. But I never looked you up on Wikipedia, which I did today.
Oh no!
And there were no big surprises, except I did find out that you that functional medicine is a controversial form of medicine for which there is no scientific basis.
Yeah, well, this is actually true. It's you know, there's actually, it's fascinating.
This is Wikipedia, which is owned by pharma.
Yeah, it's not actually accurate. We think it's accurate, but we tried to change it, and there was some guy who was controlling it and wouldn't let us update it. And in fact,
you can't sue them. I actually tried suing them because they're so blatant about their pharma bias. Anything that that challenges the pharmaceutical paradigm, the allopathic paradigm, whether it's nutritional medicine, whether it's vitamins, whether it's chiropractors, osteopaths, functional medicine, integrative medicine. I mean, Deepak Chopra, who's a really not a controversial guy,
no,
has sued them to try to get his entire profile removed because they couldn't correct it. Gary Null is in the process of suing him, but as it turns out,
well, I use it a badge of honor. If I'm on Quack Watch, then I feel like I've succeeded in life. because they're paying attention. They recommend against reading my books.
I just did this book with Judy Mikovits, who worked for many years at NIH and was this extraordinary scientist who was one of the first scientists to isolate HIV and went on to discover these retroviruses in the blood supply, XMRV, that are carcinogenic. And were shut down by Tony Falchi. One of the things that she worked on when she was at NIH was interferon. And she, when COVID first came, and I said to her, "What do you think I should be doing?" She said, "Load up on interferon." And she gave me the name of a company here in LA that makes it. A lot of people make it. And she said, just spray it on the back of your throat if you're going to travel or if you're exposed or if you get it. And I read that the Cubans are using it and the Chinese are using it very successfully.
The Cubans have developed a really good drug based on this. It's very effective. They've been using it.
Yeah. So what else is there? There's, how about Zithromax?
Well, I mean, I think, look, people are grasping at straws, and there's so many trials right now on things like combinations of hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax, which is azithromycin, remdesivir, and these are marginal. When you look at the effect of remdesivir, what really struck me about that study was that, I think it might help mitigate things in some patients, but they stopped the study before we could actually have a coherent kind of research protocol that would see about the effect on mortality. So there was no benefit that was found on death rates. It only reduced the time in the ICU from 15 on average to 11 days. And Steve Nissen from Cleveland Clinic, who's the head of cardiology, one of the top scientists there, was outraged and said, how could you stop a study like this before we could actually get real data? And it's going to generate billions of dollars for Gilead Pharmaceuticals, which is not a terrible thing, but it's just a shame that they didn't do the evidence. And then with ozone, what's striking is rather than an average of 15 to 21 days to become extubated in the ICU, it's 5 days. 5 days. I mean, and they made a huge deal from basically 15 to 11. It's 5 days with ozone in very sick patients. Now, this data needs to be further analyzed. We need to complete the clinical trials. It's going to happen in a few months, but I think when that data comes out, it's going to be hard to ignore. And I think I've spoken to a lot of people in this country, and some people are interested. The Cleveland Clinic, I have to say, they're very open, and they review the proposal that I put forth. And the problem there is that they've done such a good job in shutting down the spread that they don't have that many patients anymore. So it's hard to get studies going because there just aren't the patients. But I think that this will come through. And other these immune modulators, they're super expensive. They're potentially risky. I think there's a lot of stuff being looked at, but I think nobody's really thinking about how do you change the response of the host, and that's what diet does. That's what nutraceuticals do, and that's what these I call these hormetic therapies. They're therapies that actually activate the body's own healing response, which is far greater than anything you could do with a drug.
So a lot of people are asking about the interferon, and I want to say one thing really quickly. I am not a doctor, so you should not be listening to me about medical issues. But the interferon supplement that Judy Mikovits told me about that I ordered and all my kids are taking it is called Paximune, and you can get it on on the internet. And then I use also something called Proimmune, which is a glutathione booster that a lot of people have spoken very highly of. And again, I am not endorsing it. I'm just telling you what I'm using. And then I use coca-cola's vitamin C liposomal, and I take vitamin D and zinc. So that's my kind of armor.
That's good. Yeah. Well, Bobby, I know you're not a doctor, but many of our mutual friends are taking the Bobby Kennedy protocol.
I did send it around to a lot of people.
I was like, what? You didn't pass that by me.
So, magical Mark Hyman. Oh, and before I let you go, let's talk a little bit about food, because you and I have been, we were natural friends. I don't even remember how I first met you anymore. But
I met you at your house. It was a big picnic or something you're having, and your wife invited me, and we talked about mercury, and that was the end of that. It was a love affair.
Yeah, that I almost destroyed your life and your career. And that would have been the end of Mark Hyman. You came this close to getting what I got from that.
Well, I actually had mercury poisoning. That's how I got to figure this all out.
That's right. But let's talk about food. Well, let me ask you this first, because I'm curious about this. There was a historical split between allopathic medicine and kind of what we would consider alternative medicine, I think in the beginning in the 1880s, 1920s. And now I get the impression that there are, even the mainstream medical community, there are more and more doctors who are willing to look at functional medicine and integrative medicine. Do you find that too, or is there still a possibility?
I mean, listen, I've been working on the margins for years, and the CEO of Cleveland Clinic met me at the World Economic Forum, invited me to a dinner, and I joked around with him about how I could empty out half his hospitals, and would you like that? And he's like, yeah, that'd be a good thing. And then, he wouldn't stop bugging me, and he eventually made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and invited me to come set up a center for functional medicine there, which is now 6 years old, and we publish research, and we're doing clinical trials and having incredible results. And functional medicine is not, in my view, is not alternative medicine. It's really the future of how we're thinking about systems, right? It's ecosystem medicine. And you run Riverkeepers, Bobby, and you understand ecosystems better than anybody. And it's really an ecosystem approach to dealing with health and disease. And it's based on the emerging science of systems biology. The microbiome is a great example. Traditional medicine can't explain how you can take a fecal transplant from a kid who's normal and put it in an autistic kid, and the kid becomes better, right? That doesn't make sense given the current paradigm, but that makes total sense in terms of functional medicine. So whether it's focusing on how you regulate inflammation, whether it's focusing on how do you optimize your mitochondria, detoxify, your hormone balance, and these are things that are not alternative in my view. They're simply where medicine is going. And yes, some of the tools we use might be food or nutraceuticals. We use drugs sometimes, things like ozone, whatever. It's really designed to understand how do we generate health, and that's really the difference. It's the difference between sort of industrial agriculture and regenerative medicine. I mean, regenerative agriculture. It's the same thing. And I think
that's one of the other things. You say, people say to you, food is like medicine. You always say, food is not like medicine. Food is medicine.
It is medicine, right? And I'm writing a book about this now. But I think that people don't understand that food isn't calories. That it actually is like code that regulates every single function of your body in real time. It controls what bacteria are growing in your gut, microbiome, it regulates your hormones, regulates your brain chemistry, your immune system. Every single aspect of your biology is regulated by what you're eating. I mean, this is one study. Forget. Like, let's say you're eating a diet that's depleted. What's your risk of COVID-19? Well, there was an amazing study out of China where they looked at selenium levels in the soil. And in some areas it's very depleted, in other areas it's very high. And in the areas where it was very depleted, there was a 5 times higher risk of death from COVID-19. That's a 500% increased risk of death. It's ridiculous. And with high levels of selenium, there was a 3-fold reduction in death rates. So I think that just speaks to how important nutrients are and food is in our biology.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I'm also taking a selenium supplement, everybody.
Yeah.
You know me, I have never been a careful eater.
No,
You kind of got me to stop eating McDonald's, and you got me mainly off of sugar.
Yeah, you're healthier than when I met you.
If you would come and taught and cook for me, Mark, I could be eating medicine all day.
I'm happy to do that.
It's a lot of work doing what you do. To me, it's a lot of work to eat.
Cooking?
Yeah, to eat healthy.
It's just a habit, like it's anything else. It doesn't. Once you learn the skill, I mean, you have so many skills, Bobby. Once you learn them, you're good at them. And then it's like anything else. If you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of scary. But you can learn. It's not that hard. People do it, and I feel like that's what we need to do. And everybody's home cooking now. So the more people can cook with real ingredients, fresh food, the better they're going to be.
And last subject, I was part of the legal team that won the Monsanto case last year, and had you rooting for us from the sidelines. But all of the things you and I have done for our lives are all tied up, and ultimately they end up in the soil and the water. And, you know, one of the things that I think you've been really a champion of this philosophy that the best way, along with Woody Harrelson and a couple of other people, that the best thing you could do for the environment is to change your diet and to eat foods that actually enrich the soil. There's a film that came out that to me was one of the most heartening documentaries I've seen. It's called Kiss the Ground.
Yeah.
And you played a big part in that, but it was the one thing that gave me hope that we can deal with the climate change issue.
Yeah.
Because actually one of the reasons we're not processing all this carbon that we're putting in the atmosphere is that the soils have been sealed off and are not doing their job of integrating carbon and removing carbon from the atmosphere. And if we actually, you know, got rid of a lot of these pesticides, the glyphosate and others, it would open up the soil and they would become a sink, a sponge for carbon, which is the way they function.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Bobby. I think people don't realize this. I mean, I think people think they have to go vegan to actually save the atmosphere and climate. But the truth is that integrating animals into regenerative agriculture is absolutely necessary. You don't have to eat the animals, but you absolutely need the animals to generate the soil. And people don't realize that 1/3 of all the carbon that's in the atmosphere today, 1/3 comes from the loss of soil organic matter and soil erosion. Of the 1 trillion tons, it's about 300 billion tons. And the UN estimates that if we took 2 million of the 5 million hectares of degraded farmable land around the world and converted it to regenerative agriculture, we could stop climate change for 20 years. And it would cost $300 billion, which is the amount of money that which is less than the amount of money Medicare spends on diabetes every year and about 60 days of global military spending. So it's totally doable. And I think what we're not realizing is that the way we're growing food is actually destroying the soil because of tillage, because of the chemicals we put on the soil. Glyphosate destroys the microbiology of the soil. It also destroys our microbiome. So it has multiple harmful effects. And I think the good news, Bobby, is you're right, is we actually have the potential to transform this. And whether you want to be paleo or vegan or whatever, I joke, I call it pegan to sort of poke fun at all the diet extremes, but we should all be regenitarians, which is an aspiration. It's not possible right yet because we don't have enough scale, but it is scalable. And people say, well, it's not scalable. We need factory farms to feed the world. We don't. In fact, we can produce far more animals using regenerative methods on degraded land than we can in factory farms. And I was really heartened to see, I don't know if you saw this, but Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker introduced a bill to end factory farming by 2040. So that would be amazing.
And as you know, I brought the original cases on factory farming against Smithfield, against Purdue, and we have waterkeepers all over the country who are bringing those cases now and really putting pressure on the big the meat factories, which are producing. I mean, there's one of these, the Circle 4. There's a Smithfield factory in Utah that has, I think it has 800,000 sows. It produces more sewage or fecal matter by weight every day than all the human beings in New York City. And they just dump that stuff out into the environment.
Wow. Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of other environmental problems. And do you have a copy of your latest book that you can hold up and show people?
Oh, yeah, sure. Food Fix. It's actually what this is about. It's called Food Fix, How to Save Our Health, Our Economy, Our Communities, and Our Planet one bite at a time.
Is it written backwards on the
No, Bobby. It's Instagram. They haven't figured this out yet. I don't know what. Anyway.
And where can people follow you, Dr. Mark Hyman?
Yeah, Dr. Mark Hyman on social media. They can go to my website, drhyman.com. I've got a podcast, The Doctor's Pharmacy, which you're on at your show's coming up on June. We're going to go into glyphosate in great detail. I'm very excited about that.
And if people get really sick or they know somebody who's sick, what is your private cell phone?
Oh, it's 1-800-CALL-BOBBY.
Where can they reach you? The Cleveland Clinic?
Well, I've got a medical practice called the Ultra Wellness Center, which we're doing all virtual care now. People can get treated for all sorts of issues and just rejuvenation, whatever they want. And also run the Center for Functional Medicine at Cleveland Clinic, so they can find me there. So there's a lot of places to find me. And
okay, Mark Hyman, thank you so much. Let's do this again soon.
Okay, Bobby, anytime, anytime.
Thank you,
Good
Mark.
to see you. All right, buddy.
Yeah.